I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my collar, my reflection staring back at me with a mix of determination and dread. The invitation to the family dinner had arrived weeks ago, but I had pushed it to the back of my mind, hoping it would disappear. But here I was, preparing to face the inevitable. My name is Alex, and I've built a life that many would envy: a successful tech company, financial stability, and a feature in Forbes. Yet none of that seemed to matter when it came to my family. To them, I was still the quiet, bookish cousin who never quite fit in. The restaurant, Le Grand Bleu, was the epitome of elegance and pretension. It was the kind of place where the air was filled with the scent of expensive perfumes and the clinking of crystal glasses. I had always found it ironic that a family who prided themselves on their humble roots would choose such an ostentatious setting for a supposedly intimate gathering. But then again, my family had always been a study in contradictions. As I drove to the restaurant, my hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white with tension. I rehearsed various excuses in my mind: fake an emergency, pretend I had a sudden work crisis, anything to avoid the inevitable confrontation. But deep down, I knew I couldn't back out. The guilt in my mother's voice echoed in my ears, a silent plea that I couldn't ignore. Lila had always been the silent pillar of our family, her strength hidden beneath a veil of quiet resignation. I couldn't let her down, no matter how much I wanted to. The valet took my car, and I stood outside the restaurant for a moment, too long, the late summer heat of Austin still lingering in the air. My palms were damp, and my heart tapped out a warning rhythm. I could still leave, get back in the car, and drive away. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The maitre d' recognized my name and led me to the table where my family was already seated. The scene was exactly as I had imagined: Jason, my cousin, with his smug grin, Emma, my sister, in a dress that was a size too small, and Leela, sandwiched between two aunts, nodding politely. No one noticed me for a full 3 seconds, and then Jason's voice cut through the chatter. "Look who finally decided to show up," he called out, his voice loud enough to turn heads. I forced a smile, trying to maintain my composure. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I took a step toward an empty chair at the end of the table, but Emma's voice sliced through the air. She said, shaking her head with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That seat's for Uncle Leo. You know, family." The word hit me like a physical blow, and I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Jason leaned forward, pushing his chair slightly, closing off the space. "Yeah, we're packed in tonight. You might want to grab something from the other table over there." He gestured behind me without even glancing. It wasn't a joke. The others weren't laughing. My mother looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I stood there for a moment, the weight of their stares pressing down on me. The table was filled with people I had grown up with, people I had shared laughter and tears with. And now there wasn't even a place for me to sit. My pulse thudded in my ears, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I turned and walked toward an empty table, dragging a chair back across the floor. The screech of metal legs over marble echoed loudly, but I didn't stop. I set the chair just beside their table, not quite in, not quite out close enough to hear them, too far to be part of them. I sat down, ordered a black coffee, and folded my hands in my lap, my shoulders itching with the weight of every sideways glance in the room. Across from me, Emma raised her glass, a smirk playing on her lips. "To togetherness," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. Some of them laughed, not everyone, but enough. Jason nudged someone next to him and whispered something I didn't catch. I watched the condensation on my glass, my face unreadable. If I blinked too long, I'd give myself away. This was just the beginning of the night, and already the cracks in our family facade were beginning to show. But I was determined not to let them see how much it hurt. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to back down now. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight for my place at the table, both literally and metaphorically. The clinking of glasses and the hum of polite conversation filled the air as I sat at the edge of the family table, my coffee growing cold in front of me. I scanned the faces around me, each one a familiar landscape of shared history and hidden tensions. The opulence of Le Grand Bleu seemed to amplify the stark contrast between the luxurious setting and the undercurrents of resentment that flowed beneath our family's polished surface. Jason, ever the charmer, held court at one end of the table, his laughter echoing through the room as he regaled the others with stories that were likely more fiction than fact. Emma sat beside him, her eyes flicking to me occasionally, a mixture of amusement and disdain in her gaze. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, the unspoken demand that I play my part in their carefully orchestrated charade. The waiter approached, offering wine and appetizers, but I declined with a subtle shake of my head. I wasn't here to indulge, I was here to observe, to understand the dynamics that had shaped our family and to find my place within them, or perhaps to finally accept that I didn't have one. As the evening wore on, the conversation flowed around me like a river carving its path through stone. I listened as they discussed everything from politics to the latest gossip, their voices blending into a symphony of familiar cadences and subtle jabs. No one asked about my work or my life beyond the occasional glance in my direction, a silent acknowledgement of my presence, but little more. I watched as they passed bread and clinked glasses, their laughter ringing out like a well-rehearsed performance. It was a dance we had all perfected over the years, each of us playing our roles with practiced ease. But tonight, something felt different. Tonight, I could see the cracks in the facade, the subtle shifts in their expressions that betrayed the truth beneath the surface. The moment that sealed it came when Jason, with a smirk, made a joke about people forgetting their roots once they had a little cash. Emma threw her head back and laughed, her eyes locking with mine in a challenge that was impossible to miss. I sat still, my jaw clenched behind a calm expression, as the weight of their words settled over me like a shroud. It wasn't the first time I had been the butt of their jokes, the target of their thinly veiled barbs. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, I could see the game for what it was, a desperate attempt to maintain control, to keep me in my place, and I was done playing along. The waiter appeared again, this time with the dinner menus, his smile as rehearsed as the performance unfolding around me. Jason, with a flourish, opened his menu and began to peruse the offerings, his voice carrying across the table as he discussed the merits of wagyu beef and lobster. I watched as the others followed suit, their eyes scanning the pages with an eagerness that bordered on greed. I didn't need to look at the menu to know what I wanted. I wanted respect. I wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be valued for more than just my bank account. But as I glanced around the table, I realized that tonight I would have to fight for it, and I was ready. As the waiter took their orders, I sat in silence, my eyes fixed on the menu in front of me. I could feel their gazes, the subtle shifts in their posture as they waited for me to speak, to acquiesce to their demands. But I didn't. I simply handed the menu back to the waiter with a polite smile, my order unspoken. The tension in the air was palpable, a living, breathing thing that seemed to pulse with the beat of my heart. I could see the confusion in their eyes, the flicker of uncertainty as they realized that tonight things would not go as planned. And as I sat there, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and the weight of expectation, I knew that the time for silence was over. The time for action had begun. As the main courses were served, the atmosphere at the table shifted. The clinking of silverware against fine china filled the air, punctuated by the occasional laugh or raised voice as conversations ebbed and flowed. I watched as Jason, ever the performer, held court at his end of the table, regaling the others with stories that seemed designed to highlight his own successes while subtly diminishing mine. Emma, seated beside him, played her part perfectly, her laughter always a beat too loud, her eyes flicking to me with a gleam of triumph. She had always been competitive, always seeking to assert her dominance in our family dynamics. Tonight was no different, and I could feel the weight of her gaze, the unspoken challenge in her smile. The tension in the air was thick, a palpable force that seemed to press down on me from all sides. I could feel the expectations of my family, the silent demand that I play my part in their carefully orchestrated charade. But tonight, something inside me had shifted. Tonight, I was no longer willing to be a silent observer, a passive participant in my own life. The turning point came when Jason, with a smirk, made a derogatory comment about my success. Some people forget their roots once they have a little cash, he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. The table fell silent for a moment, the clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation fading into the background as all eyes turned to me. I felt a surge of anger, a primal force that demanded release, but I held it in check, my expression calm and composed as I met their gazes head on. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the opportunity to confront the elephant in the room and reclaim my voice. You know, Jason, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil within me. It's interesting how you always seem to bring up my success. as if it's a flaw, as if building something from nothing is a crime. Jason's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing as he leaned back in his chair, the picture feigned nonchalance. Come on, Alex, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. You're taking this way too seriously. It's just a joke. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time, a joke. I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. Is that what this is? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels a lot more like a thinly veiled attempt to undermine me, to keep me in my place. I could see the shock in their expressions, the realization that tonight things would not go as planned. The table fell silent, the air thick with tension as I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. I mean, isn't that what we're all striving for? I said, my gaze sweeping over the table. To build something meaningful, to leave a legacy? Or are we just here to tear each other down and revel in our own petty jealousies? The silence was deafening, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. I could see the discomfort in their eyes, the flicker of uncertainty as they realized that tonight the dynamics had shifted, and I was the catalyst for that change. Emma, unable to resist the urge to defend her ally, chimed in, her voice sharp and cutting. You always were so sensitive, Alex, she said, her eyes narrowing as she leaned forward in her chair. Can't you take a joke? I turned to face her, my expression calm and composed. This isn't about sensitivity. Emma, I said, my voice steady. It's about respect. It's about recognizing that words have power and that the constant jabs and snide remarks have consequences. She scoffed, rolling her eyes as she leaned back in her chair. Please, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You're making a big deal out of nothing? It's just family banter? But I wasn't swayed. I had seen the truth in their eyes, the flicker of guilt that betrayed their true intentions. And I was determined to see this through, to stand my ground and demand the respect I deserved. As the waiter approached with the bill, I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me like a physical force. But I refused to buckle under the pressure. Instead, I reached out and took the bill, my eyes scanning the itemized list of extravagances that had been ordered in my name. $3,247, I said, my voice steady as I read the total aloud. Wagyu, lobster, truffles, vintage wine, double desserts, and not a single thing that I ordered. I looked up, my gaze sweeping over the table as I took in their expressions, the smug satisfaction in Jason's eyes, the barely concealed glee in Emma's smile, the quiet resignation in Mila's posture. And in that moment, I made my decision. With a slow, deliberate motion, I closed the bill and slid it gently across the table, placing it directly in front of Jason. His eyes widened in shock, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as he struggled to comprehend the implications of my actions. What's this? He stammered, his voice barely audible above the hum of the restaurant. I leaned back in my chair, a small smile playing on my lips as I met his gaze head on. Oh, you thought I was covering this, I said, my voice laced with amusement. That's cute. The table erupted in a flurry of protest, their voices blending into a cacophony of outrage and disbelief. But I didn't flinch. I simply sat there, my expression calm and composed as I weathered the storm, knowing that I had finally drawn a line in the sand, and there was no going back. Come on, Alex, Jason said, his voice taking on a harder edge. Don't be like this. It's just a dinner. We're family. But I wasn't swayed by his attempts to manipulate me. I had seen this game played out too many times before, the subtle shifts in power dynamics, the unspoken expectations that hung heavy in the air. And I was done playing along. Family, I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. Is that what this is? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels a lot more like a transaction, a quid pro quo where my worth is measured in dollars and cents. The silence that followed was deafening, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. I could see the shock in their eyes, the realization that tonight the game had changed, and I was the one holding the cards. Emma, unable to resist the urge to have the last word, leaned forward in her chair, her eyes narrowing as she met my gaze. You always were so dramatic, Alex, she said, her voice sharp and cutting. Always making a scene, always playing the victim. But I didn't rise to the bait. I simply smiled, my expression calm and composed as I met her gaze head on. This isn't about drama, Emma, I said, my voice steady. It's about standing up for myself. It's about demanding the respect I deserve and refusing to be silenced any longer. And with that, I stood up, my chair scraping back against the marble floor as I pushed it away from the table. The room fell silent, all eyes on me as I turned and walked away, my head held high and my heart pounding in my chest. I had made my stand, drawn my line in the sand, and there was no going back. As I walked away from the table, the silence in the room was palpable. I could feel the weight of their stares on my back, the shock and disbelief radiating from each of them. But I didn't look back. I kept moving, my steps steady and deliberate, as I made my way to the lounge area off the main dining floor. The lights were lower here, the music softer, and the illusion of peace a little more believable. I sat near a tall window facing Congress Avenue, the view blurred by the reflection of the chandelier behind me. People passed by outside, free and unaware, and for a brief moment I envied their anonymity. Footsteps approached, but I didn't look up. I already knew who it was. "Hey, Alex," Jason said, his voice smooth and casual as if nothing had happened. He took the liberty of sitting across from me, leaning back in his chair like we were old friends catching up over drinks. "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let the silence hang between us, a tangible force that seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. Jason shifted in his seat, his casual demeanor faltering slightly under the weight of my gaze. "Look," he began again, his tone more serious this time. "Between you and me, this whole dinner, it wasn't just about catching up. You probably figured that out already." "No kidding," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil within me. "But here's the thing, Jason. I'm not here to fund a show I wasn't cast in. I'm not here to be your punching bag or your scapegoat. I'm done playing that role." He blinked, taken aback by my bluntness. "Come on, Alex," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Don't turn this into some kind of protest. It's family. We rib each other. We lean on each other. We cover when someone can't. We're all adults here. You're not going to let a couple of offhand jokes ruin the night, are you?" I leaned back in my chair, my expression calm and composed as I met his gaze head on. "You mean I pay and you all feel good," I said, my voice laced with amusement. "That's not how this works, Jason. Not anymore?" He exhaled sharply, his eyes narrowing as he leaned forward in his chair. "Okay, Alex," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "If that's how you feel, there it is. But just know if you don't step up here, it won't go unnoticed. You know how mom is, you know how the others are. I'm trying to protect you, honestly, from the narrative." I stared at him, my expression unyielding. "Is that a threat?" I asked, my voice steady. He shook his head a little too quickly. "No," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. "It's just reality. This family talks always has, you know how it is. If you refuse to do something this small, it gives them permission to say a lot worse." That was the moment I realized he wasn't here to talk. He was here to control the fallout, to spin the narrative in his favor. I smiled, slow and careful, as I leaned forward in my chair. "You don't get to build a fire under me," I said, my voice steady, and then ask why I'm sweating. "And if you think I'm the kind of person who pays hush money in the form of cheesecake and lobster, you're not nearly as smart as you think." He blinked, taken aback by my words, and for the first time all night, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He stood up, adjusting his shirt collar like it had suddenly gotten too tight. "I'm trying to keep things from getting messy," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "They already are?" I replied softly. "But not because of me." With that, I stood up, my chair scraping back against the marble floor as I pushed it away from the table. The room fell silent once again, all eyes on me as I turned and walked away, my head held high and my heart pounding in my chest. I had made my stand, drawn my line in the sand, and there was no going back. As I made my way to the exit, I could feel the weight of their stares, the shock and disbelief radiating from each of them. But I didn't look back. I kept moving, my steps steady and deliberate, as I pushed open the door and stepped out into the night. The cool air hit me like a physical force, and I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. I had done it. I had stood up for myself, demanded the respect I deserved, and refused to be silenced any longer. And as I walked away from the restaurant, the sounds of the city enveloping me, I felt a sense of liberation and empowerment that I had never known before. 2 days later, I woke up in my apartment, wrapped in a kind of stillness that didn't ache. There were no missed calls, no texts, no new voicemails, no digital breadcrumbs leading back to that table. Just me, the soft hum of the air conditioning, and the late morning sun filtering through half-closed blinds. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I was embracing for the next thing, the next jab, the next demand, the next guilt-laced favor. The silence didn't feel empty, it felt earned. Mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Lila. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the play button for a full minute before I tapped it. Her voice was softer than I expected, tired and cracked around the edges. "Alex," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't make it worse. I just, I know they were wrong. I know I should have said something. I was scared. That's not an excuse, but if you never come back, I still love you. I didn't cry because I was broken. I cried because for once, someone in that family didn't ask me for something. She just left the door open quietly. I played the message again, then set the phone down and didn't reply, not out of clarity. Some wounds heal with time, others become part of the skin, like a scar you stop noticing until someone touches it. Later that night, I opened my laptop, my startup's dashboard lighting up with numbers, graphs, and real momentum. The work I'd built without a single favor, every email, every investor pitch, every long night of questioning if it would all fall apart. And yet here it was, alive and growing. I met my own eyes in the reflection of the screen. I didn't lose them. I whispered. I found myself. I closed the laptop and stood, walking to the kitchen where I poured a glass of wine and opened the balcony door. Austin's skyline stretched out in front of me, quiet and glowing, unaware of my family's theatrics. The kind of city that lets you disappear and reappear entirely on your own terms. Just as I took the first sip, my phone buzzed again, a message from Emma. Hey, Alex, I just wanted to say I'm really sorry if tonight felt weird. I know things got awkward. I still love you, you know that, right? I stared at the screen, letting the message sit there like a cheap peace offering. Weird. That's what she called it. I didn't reply, not yet. Something about it didn't sit right. The tone was off. Too polished, too rehearsed. I locked my phone and stood up straight, already planning to leave, but curiosity got the better of me. As I walked slowly back toward the dining area, I opened Instagram. A notification popped up. Emma had tagged me in a story. I tapped it, and there it was, a boomerang clip of the table laughing, glasses raised, everyone smiling like it was the best night of their lives. The caption read, "Family over everything." I looked closer, and there I was, half in the frame, my elbow and shoulder cut right at the edge like an afterthought. She tagged me but carefully angled the video to crop me out visually. I was there, but I wasn't. It was surgical, a curated illusion that was never an apology. It was a setup: text me sweetly, post me silently. I took a breath, and it didn't steady me, it only stoked the fire. No more backing down, no more being the bigger person. I wasn't interested in size, I was interested in truth. I walked back to the table slowly, with the calm they didn't recognize on my face. Emma noticed me first, her expression tightening just a fraction before she replaced it with a smile, that same stage smile I'd seen since we were kids. The cameras are on, behave, smile. She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. If anyone here thinks I'm just here for your highlight reel, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, but not loud enough to startle, let me make this very clear. I pulled out my own phone, held up her Instagram post. I am not your accessory. You want me cropped out of your life? Do it honestly. Don't tag me for optics. Don't pretend you reached out when all you did was hide your insult behind a filter. Lila whispered my name like she was trying to calm a dog. Alex, don't do this here, she pleaded softly. Jason leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. Alex, come on, don't make this dramatic. I turned to him, my expression yielding. Is that what this is, Jason? Drama? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels a lot more like reality, and it's about time someone called it out. With that, I turned and walked away from the table, my head held high and my heart pounding in my chest. I had made my stand, drawn my line in the sand, and there was no going back. As I pushed open the door and stepped out into the night, I felt a sense of liberation and empowerment that I had never known before. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning, and I was ready to fight for my place, to demand the respect I deserved, and to finally truly find my voice